welcome to Pen and Scroll Playthrough. This is episode number 2. My name is Kevin Thompson, designer at Pen and Scroll Games, and on PSP2 today we're going to be looking at a game called Knights of the Round Table. So, the Knights of the Round Table have been campaigning for years, and they finally returned home. Their greatest desire? They want to sit and play their favorite game. To their dismay, they've discovered that marauders have destroyed all the copies of their favorite game, and now it's out of print. They don't know what to do. After a time, they decide to re-implement the game in their own style and character as a tribute to the original. So what is this story an allegory of? Well, it tells the story of King's Court, a game that we looked at on episode number 1 of Pen and Scroll Playthrough. King's Court was first published in 1983, and it's been out of print pretty much since that time. Has a cult following. There are people looking for new copies of this game, or just old copies of this game, and they're in short supply. So Pen and Scroll Games has re-implemented King's Court as Knights of the Round Table. And so on our playthrough today, we're going to walk through Knights of the Round Table. All right, so here we have a prototype copy of Knights of the Round Table. Most of what you see here will be how it looks in the final production. There could be some minor changes in wording or those kinds of things, but it will be very much the same. And as we go through this, you'll see that it was inspired by King's Court, and so it should be like second nature to someone that is familiar with King's Court. All right, it's a simple card game, so the box really just has some instructions, the game rules, and cards. So we're going to walk through the cards. The basics of Knights of the Round Table is very much like Uno. Okay, but that's just the very beginning. So if there's a card sitting on the discard pile on your turn, the easiest thing to do is to try to match the color or match the number. So if I match the number, I can change from gold to blue by playing another 1 on the 1, okay? Or I can play the same color. All right, and now the next card type is a skip. So that skips the next player. In a 2-player game, the player that played it gets to take another turn. Now I'm just showing these. I can't really play a green knight on a blue court jester, but I'm just showing them. But the next type of card is the knight. It reverses the direction of play. In a 2-player game, it acts as a skip card. And now we get into the much more fascinating aspects of this game. The next card type is a drawbridge. The basic function of a drawbridge is that the next player needs to draw 2 cards and lose a turn. But there's a catch. If that player can also play a drawbridge, then they play it and the drawing command goes to the next person. So if I play a drawbridge, the next player can do one of 2 things. They can either draw 2 cards or play another drawbridge. If they play another drawbridge, it goes to the following player, and that player has to either play a drawbridge or draw 4 cards. So that's how they work. Drawbridges can be chained and played until someone cannot play one, and then that person must draw the sum of all the drawbridges that have just been played. So that's how drawbridges work. Next one is a maiden. Maidens have to be accompanied by another card, so you can't play them by themselves. You have to play another card right after them. And the card, it's called a proper escort. Okay, a proper escort, the simplest kind of proper escort, is just a card of the same color. Okay, like a 1 or an 8 or whatever it may be. But a proper escort can be almost any shield card as well. So things like queen's options, dukes, kings, dragons, wizards, I think even a dungeon. Even a dungeon can be a proper escort. Even though it's normally not played on the discard pile initially, it's played on a player. I think it is still acceptable. Now, things like protectors and royal decrees, those kinds in the magic potion, they can't be escorts because they're not normal playing cards. We'll get to those here in a few minutes. And fair maidens can be chained, kind of like a drawbridge. You can play several fair maidens in a row, just yourself, as long as you play a proper escort for the last one. So I could play, a green fair maiden, and then a gold fair maiden, and then a blue fair maiden, and as long as I play a proper escort for the blue fair maiden, that's a legal play. So you can play several cards in one turn. Queen's option. This is a pseudo wild card. Its very basic function is to let you choose between burgundy and blue. And so it must be played on either a burgundy or a blue, and at that point you can choose to keep the color or change it to the other color. But you can also just let play continue to the next player, or you can reverse. I guess that would go this way, or you can reverse, okay, or you can skip around to the player opposite you in a 4-player game. Okay, and so there's 2 of those. There's one for green and gold as well. Now moving on to the basic standard wild cards in the game. The first one is a duke. A duke allows the player to choose a new color, and that's it. So they choose a new color, play goes to the next person, and they get to play a card of that color or some other wild card if they need to. And then there's a king. The king allows the player to play an extra card. So a lot of times they choose the color by playing the card, but you can play anything. You could play a king, and then you can play a fair maiden, and then you have to play an escort. So you could play 3 cards all at once, or even more cards if you chain certain things together. So that's a king. And then we move on to the drawing cards. First one is the dragon. The dragon is very much like a duke in that the player playing it is allowed to choose a new color. The difference being that the next player has to draw 3 cards and lose their turn. The wizard, very much like a king. Okay, so at its heart, it allows the player to choose a new color and play an extra card. But it also has a drawing effect. A player has to draw 5 cards. The difference between a dragon and a wizard is the wizard allows you to let the next player draw the 5 cards, or you can reverse the direction and the previous player has to draw the 5 cards, or you can skip the next natural player and the person after them has to draw the 5 cards. So especially in a 4-player game, you're basically choosing who you want to draw. Now, there has been some question in the games that we have played about if I play a wizard and I think about choosing some kind of direction, and as my extra card that I play reverse. Well, how does that work? Does it reverse the reverse? And it gets very confusing. So I don't think the rules, the original game rules, really address this. So our convention has been you can do one or the other. You can use the direction instructions on the wild to choose who has to draw 5, or you can play a direction card, a skip, or a reverse to do that effect. You can't do both. It's one or the other. Next, we have a dungeon card. So the dungeon card is not played onto the discard pile. The dungeon card is initially played onto the next player. That player will draw a card and lose a turn, and then when play comes back around to them again, they will draw another card and lose another turn. At that point, the dungeon is over, and it goes to the bottom of the discard pile. Okay. If the game ends, so if a dungeon is played on a player, and the game ends before they have drawn both of their cards, they have to draw both cards before the score is computed. Most of the ones that we've looked at just recently, dungeons, wizards, dragons, kings, and dukes, they can be played at any time. They can be played on any card that's sitting on the discard pile to change the color and do all these other things. So it doesn't matter what's sitting on the draw or the discard pile, you can play a dungeon on the next player. Now, with all the drawing that goes on in this game, it's good that there is some way to protect yourself. So, the first protection card is called the Protector. Okay? It simply negates a draw card. Or in the case of drawbridges, it can negate a chain of drawbridges. And so the way that I think about a protector is it voids whatever has happened. All right? If it's a single draw card, let's actually kind of do an example here. Let's say that this 3 was sitting on there and that a drawbridge had come up. Or we'll even use a dragon. Someone plays a dragon. And it's my turn. I'm going to play a protector so that I do not, it negates, it voids that draw card. It's like it never happened. So we actually pick it up and take it off, and we restore the discard pile back to what it looked like before that draw card was played. The same thing would be true if it were a chain of drawbridges. If there were a chain of drawbridges that had been played, if a protector is played, that whole chain is picked up and put on the bottom, and the deck is restored to before the drawbridges were played. So that's how a protector works. It just negates any kind of drawing activity that's going on. Royal Decree actually reverses a draw card, or it reverses a chain of drawbridges. Okay, so the last person that played a draw card, okay, has to then draw the cards rather than the person that is playing the Royal Decree. And so that does reverse the direction of play at that point. And so, play would continue back. After they lose their turn, when they draw, play would continue in a reverse direction. So these cards are nice, but they can't just be simply played on their own. You can't just play a protector, okay? You have to be attacked. You have to be forced to draw cards before you can play these. So you can get caught with them. If it's your last card, you can't just simply play it. You've got to wait for someone to make you draw, then you can get rid of it. So they're very helpful, but they can also end up causing a problem sometimes. All right. The next shield card is called the Magician. Play as any shield card. So a magician could be a protector. It could be a Royal Decree, a dragon, a dungeon, a wizard, a king, a duke, a queen's option, a fair maiden, a drawbridge, a court jester, a reverse. Yeah. So a magician can be anything that you want it to be, which is quite helpful. The last card type in Knights of the Round Table is the Magic Potion. Okay? This potion, or this card, has 2 possible effects. If it's the last card in your hand, in other words, you can't play this in the middle of the game. Okay? It has to be played as your last card. And so you would play that, and you would go out and win the round. That's its default basic use. But if somebody else goes out, what happens is, let's create a little hand here. Let's say I had a magician and this guy and even this one, and then I had some other cards here. Let's say this was my hand when somebody went out. What the Magic Potion does is it dissolves all the shield card points. So anything that has a shield on it is taken away, and my score would only be 5 points. Okay, so that's its effect when you're holding it and somebody else goes out. Now, actually, this was a bad example. I should have picked a different card. Okay, because if I'm holding, no, that was okay. That was actually a good example. But let's say I didn't have the Magic Potion, and I went out like this. Okay, well, the Magician can be any shield card. So I can choose to make the Magician a Magic Potion. Okay, and so these shield card points would go away. The difference is I would still get the 50 points for the Magician. So my total here would be 55. Okay, so it's not quite as good as a Magic Potion, as the pure Magic Potion in that case, but it can still be helpful because I saved myself 40 points. All right, so those are basic cards in the game. And now we can try to play what will hopefully be a short hand that will illustrate a little bit about how the game flows. Fresh deck of cards, a little bit harder to shuffle. All right. At the beginning of each round of the game, the dealer is allowed to try to pull off the exact number of cards that need to be dealt. So I'm going to be simulating a two-player game. So I'm going to try to pull off either 14 or 15 cards off the top. You're allowed to have the extra card to start the discard pile. Okay, so let's see if I did it here. And I did. Okay, I could have even had one more card and it would have been okay. That would start the discard pile. So when that happens, the player that was doing the dealing is allowed to do one of two things. They can either take 50 points off of their score, or they can add 50 points to someone else's score. So that's the magic of being the dealer. All right. So here we go. A little word about the starting card. If the starting card is just a number, it's clear, it's a red 4 or burgundy 4 or whatever. That would be how the game would start. But there's a lot of special cards in the game. So what happens if there's a special card that comes up on the deal? Well, the basic way to think about that is this card is as if the dealer had played it. So since a special card actually came up, this is kind of nice. So it's like I played the Queen's option as the dealer. Well, I get to choose the color. I could reverse the game. I could reverse the direction off the bat at the very beginning of the game. I could skip the next player. Okay? I can do whatever this card allows me to do. And that works pretty naturally most of the time. You can think about kings. If a king comes up, I can play an extra card as the dealer right off the bat. Instead of the player to my left going first, as is normal, I would get to go first in a sense. Okay? If it's a duke, I get to pick the right color. If it's a drawbridge, I can either draw 2 or I can play another drawbridge. Okay, all the natural things about it. If a drawbridge came up, it's like I played the drawbridge, so the next person has to play a drawbridge or draw 2. It wouldn't be me. Okay, so it's like I played the card. Like I said, that works pretty well most of the time. The strange cases are, what if the magic potion was the starting card? Well, that doesn't really make sense. I can't play the magic potion in the middle of the game. In that case, we would typically put it in and shuffle it back in and pick a different card off the top. Same thing would go for the Protector and the Royal Decree. So if it doesn't make sense, we just kind of put it back in and go from there. All right. So I guess we'll say that the left player did the dealing. And so he's going to choose, well, what is he going to choose? I guess he'll choose blue to start with. Now, he has a Fair Maiden, but he doesn't have an escort to play. There's no yellow card, no gold card, no wilds, no natural shield cards that could be played. So he's going to choose, oh, he can't choose blue. Sorry, it's green or gold. How about green? Okay. He chooses green, and so player 2 says, great, I've got a green card. I'm going to play a drawbridge. Player 1 says, haha, I'm in luck. I have a drawbridge too. So now the total drawing is up to 4, and it's come back to this player. He says, great, I've got yet another drawbridge. So now it's to 6 to player number 1. And player number 1 has no way to protect himself. He has no other drawbridges, and so he is stuck drawing 6 cards, which may very well lengthen this round a little bit. All right. He drew, he loses his turn, comes back to this guy. He's going to make the pain even more, or he thinks he is. Okay, but this guy has drawn a drawbridge, so now it's up to 4 to this guy. Well, he has another one, so now it's up to 6 to this guy. Wow, I'm just really making this a long round, aren't I? Okay, now it's to 8 to this guy here. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, there we go. Okay, so now we've got a whole lot of playing to do. Probably should have shuffled better, huh? All right, let's see how this goes. Back over here. Try to dump some points. Probably the queen's option. Maybe switch it to blue. All right, this guy over here says okay. Let's get rid of some blue points. Back over here. So skip the other player and play 4. And then 8. And then may try to save the 4, see if we can change colors in a minute. Potentially. 3. So no more blues. So this player's gonna switch it to green. Okay, he's got a green. It's all right. Another green. 7. Okay. Now player 1 cannot play, so he's going to draw. Got lucky. Okay. Nothing to naturally play, so this player 2 is going to change the color. He's going to change it to gold. Now, as much as player 1 would like to play his fair maiden, he still does not have a proper escort. And he still doesn't. So he must pass. So this acts as a skip in this game, 2 players. Okay, there we go. 8, still no good. There he goes. Okay, so now he can play a fair maiden. He has a simple proper escort, just a yellow card, and he's much happier. Okay, 1. That allows player 1 to change the color. And now player 2 is out of luck. So he skips, still can't play. There we go. A king, which allows him to play an extra card. So he chooses burgundy. This guy says, great. I will skip player 2, and normally it would be a reverse, but 2 players skip and play a 4. And play a 4, and just like with the traditional Uno style game, when a player gets down to 1 card, they must warn other players that they are about to go out. And so in Knights of the Round Table, you say on guard. So he says on guard. Now he can't play this card, that's a protector. He needs to have a draw card played against him. So he's a bit stuck at the moment. Okay, player 1 says I can change the color. Player 2 says he says player 1 says on guard. Player 2. Okay. He has a wild, but he has nothing to play, so he draws. Here's another one. Okay. And then he finally gets something. He says on guard again. And then player 1 goes out. Okay. In this case, player 2 would receive 35 points. And we would keep playing rounds until someone reaches 500 points. And there are some minor variations on that. There is one specific rule that says so the person that reaches 500 points loses the game. At that point, the person with the lowest score wins the game. But if the person actually gets 500 points exactly, then their score is cut in half to 250. If at that point they are winning the game's over and they win. Now, if someone else is still winning the game, then play just continues. They just had their score cut in half. So anyways. All right, so that is a round of Knights of the Round Table.